is Big Play Detroit. I am Chris Castellani, joined by Austin Sisler, co-host and producer. And congratulations to everyone out there who is watching this or listening to this. As I just stated in a video I uploaded a few minutes ago, you have survived another Scott Harris trade deadline, and that is obviously where we're going to start, because this is the end of a chapter, really. And Skubal's the biggest part of this, but I would say when Tarik became Tarik, like the guy that we know as this dominant force in Major League Baseball, which was early in the 2024 season, I have been getting asked questions, and it's not just me, it's everyone in Detroit media, what the future had in store for Tarik Skubal. And I've given different answers because I never really knew. No one ever really knows. But here we are. It has now happened. Tarik Skubal gone. Casey Mize gone. The Tigers still find themselves, as of the time of this recording, 2.5 games out of a playoff spot. What does it all mean? Let's start with the Tarik Skubal trade. Okay. The first thing I got to point out about this deal was the timing of it. It seems very clear to me that Detroit felt extremely comfortable with the return that they were getting back from Los Angeles. If they didn't, I don't think that they would have made this move almost 48 hours before the deadline was over. It was a strange situation watching a Tigers game in which a trade had basically broken, and you had Benetti and Dirk sitting on the broadcast, kind of, they were talking about it, but things hadn't quite been confirmed. But it is very much official. We saw Tarik in the dugout on the Sunday night game for the Dodgers. Tarik Skubal traded, right? He's got about 2 months remaining on his current contract before he becomes a free agent. And as it stands, Detroit gets back 3 prospects. They get back Zaire Hope, outfielder, number 5 in the Dodgers organization, number 25 overall in Major League Baseball's prospect rankings. You get back River Ryan, who is in the 60s in terms of overall prospects, but there's kind of some weird logistics there because he's 27 years old. At what point are you no longer a prospect? And you get Brady Smith, who is a high strikeout, hard-throwing guy who's currently working his way through the system. I think he's currently in high A ball in the Dodgers system. We'll see where he ends up in Detroit. Okay. Look, this is tough, and I'm going to have a lot to say, and we might have to get 2 segments out of this because the reaction to this on social media, which is not necessarily real life, but I'm on there all the time. I've been fortunate enough to gain a following on social media because of social media. But the response amongst Tiger fans was that this was not just an underwhelming return, but borderline disastrous. And you guys know I'm a Tiger fan, right? This is how I've been able to grow the brand doing that. And I want to just speak to you because I know how this fan base works. I think so much of this negative response by Tiger fans is leftover trauma from the Avila era, okay? And mainly the Verlander trade, and it was mainly that 2017 season where you had a lot of talent at the big league level. You weren't succeeding. You elected to sell, and not only did you get nothing back, but it sent you into this endless rebuild that really didn't fix itself until you made the playoffs in 2024, after Scott Harris had arrived. And that was at a time where Detroit was not a system known to develop players. And this is a big part of this. In fact, I would argue it's the biggest part of this. The organization that is getting these pieces back is a million times different than the organization that got pieces back in the Avila era, right? And so when you look at where the Tigers are at and where the Dodgers are at, for a situation in which you had little leverage. You did, okay? You went for it before the season. You loaded up on pitching. It hasn't worked out. You elected to sell him at the deadline. That's what happened. But you elected to sell him for 2 months. Considering that situation, considering the return, I'm not unhappy with this. I think that as a whole, I'm generally pleased with what Scott Harris did in this particular move. And Austin, I do not know your opinion on this. You could have a completely different opinion than mine, and you may very well have one, and that's fine. But I look at it right now. First of all, I'm getting a lot of responses from people saying, well, the Dodgers might re-sign Tarik. Yeah, you know what? They might. And they'll dish out the $400+ million that we weren't going to give them. But the fact is, you can't take that into account. As of now, they have him for 2 months. Okay? It was the same thing when the Red Sox traded Mookie. Like, yes, it sucked that the Dodgers immediately signed him to an extension, but they didn't know they were going to do that. And that was more years of team control. This is 2 months plus a playoff run, right? And you get back a top 25 prospect in Zaire Hope. a guy who's tearing it up in Double-A, meaning he's not that far away from being at the big league level. If we have a season next year, he's probably going to be a part of their run in some capacity. Another lefty bat, a potential 2020 guy, right? Has speed on the base paths, can hit for power, tons of upside. And then you take on two pitchers, one in River Ryan, who has some major league experience, right? Nasty stuff, coming off of Tommy John surgery, still has a fastball that can approach triple digits. And this is an organization over the last several years that has taken Cater Montero and developed him into an excellent pitcher. It's taken Troy Melton and developed him into an excellent pitcher. You know Jackson Job's going to hit the ground running and develop into a fantastic pitcher. It's an organization that turned Tarik Skubal into a two-time Cy Young winner. So I look at these pieces, I look at the toys they have to work with, and I say to myself, there's something you can play with here. There's a lot that you can go off of. And I've seen some tweets that just some mind-numbingly stupid opinions of people saying, I think it was John Heyman who said, there's belief that Zaire Hope could be a multi-time all-star in this league, but people are still, still think the Tigers didn't get enough. Let me tell you something. If Zaire Hope becomes a multi-time all-star, if he becomes Riley Green for 2 months of Tarik Skubal, it's a win for Scott Harris. Okay. As far as I'm concerned, you added a piece to your core, right? In an ideal world, this team was 10 games over and 10 games up, and they wouldn't have traded Tarik, and we would have bought and gone for it this season. That's not how it works. Okay. This team had 110 games to earn the right to be buyers. They didn't. I was at Tarik's last start. They blew a 7-run lead. At that point, you had to pivot. And the timing of it, a little bit bizarre, right? And you feel like there could have been a bidding war, but here's the truth, man. The Dodgers are pretty much the only team in this sport that have the leverage and have the ability to trade a ton of assets in their farm system while not feeling like they're sacrificing any little bit of their future. The Brewers can't say that. The Brewers could have gone out and made they had a loaded farm system, could have absolutely acquired Skubal. If they didn't win the World Series, people would have looked at it and said, oh man, that's a questionable trade. But they only had one chance to have a Mizorowski-Skubal playoff rotation. They didn't do it. The Dodgers have a great farm system every year, and they deserve credit for that. They do. Because, yeah, we say they go out and buy these pieces, but they've been aggressive at deadlines. And it's how they've been able to go out and get Scherzer in 21 and Trey Turner in 21 and go out and get Skubal this year. People come back and say, oh, my God, the Dodgers held on to their 4 best prospects. Yeah, well, their 5th one is, let me put it this way. The return you got back for Mize, like, you got a team's 2nd best prospect, and it's still not as good as Zaire Hope. So I think that you have to look at this situation in a vacuum for what it is. You didn't have a ton of leverage in this situation, and you had this one piece that you dangled out there. And as far as I'm concerned, I like the return you got. It's not me guaranteeing these guys are going to be stars, right? But that's what selling at the deadline is. It's hope banking on the future. We've done this a million times. So that's how I stand on this. I want to talk about the Casey move here and just shorten it. Then, Austin, I'll toss it over to you. Casey Mize. In return, you get Cash Mayfield and Jackson Wolf. Jackson Wolf, I knew very little about, and he'd kind of been struggling down the minor leagues. Cash Mayfield is the 2nd best prospect in what is admittedly not a particularly deep farm system in San Diego. They have sold off a lot of assets at deadlines over the last several years in an attempt to get better. They did it again by going out and getting Robbie Ray and Casey Mize. I think this will ultimately be a win for Scott Harris. Look, we like Casey, homegrown guy, pitched some really good baseball this year. Casey fades in the second half. Casey is going to be there for 2 months. You don't know if he's going to be healthy. And you look at Casey's last several starts, velo down, and like, I can't stay healthy. I can pretty much guarantee that the Dodgers are going to get an electric version of Tarik Skubal. I don't know what version of Casey Mize the San Diego Padres are going to get. And the fact that you, in return, get a high strikeout guy, the 2nd best prospect in a team's farm system for Casey Mize, for 2 months of Casey Mize, I think it's a win. And I know that people are going to come on here and they're going to be pissed and they're going to be frustrated because you feel like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. We're not going for it. They didn't add any bullpen pieces. You know what? That's because they're sellers. They chose to sell. And even with all of that you've done, you could still probably make the playoffs. I mean, that's what's so weird with this bipolar team is that even with you selling off 2 of your best pitching guys, 2 of your best arms, there's still, even with this crappy bullpen, a reasonable chance for you to make the playoffs. Do I think you can make a run and go to the, deep into the playoffs? Not necessarily at this point, but that's the result of you having a 6-22 May. You dug your own grave. You can't complain about it now. So I come away from this deadline feeling better than I thought I would. I thought they would screw this up. I thought they would either just trade Skubal or stand pat or, God willing, actually try to add a little bit. I think considering the team they have and considering the core they have, which is still filled with young players, we'll talk about Clark in his debut in a little bit, I view this as a win. Austin, I'm going to bring you in segment number 2 because we're running a little bit long. Segment number 2, Austin, I want to get your opinion on this. And I want to just add a little bit more about this current team because there is still stuff that they're playing for, and we just had a really good weekend that featured a pretty electric debut from Max Clark. So we'll be right back. This is Big Play Detroit. All right, Big Play Detroit. Very emotional week in Tigers land. And just to recap here before I toss it over to you, Austin, generally speaking, I'm fine with the return on both these trades. I think that the Casey Mize one, I would argue, is an overpay, quite frankly. I think that's a win for Scott Harris. With Skubal, that's a wait and see, but I think on paper you have the potential to put at least 2 solid pieces of your core to add to the future young players that aren't that far off. I mean, River Ryan is going to probably be here in a few weeks. He's already had major league experience. So the way I stand on it, bizarrely, strangely, a little bit more optimistic than some other people. Austin, I don't know what your opinion is on it. Lay it on me. I want to know what you got.
So I'm very much sort of in the middle on this. That's what's so strange about this particular deadline and just this team and these last few teams over the last few years that we've had is like usually you buy when you're a good team, you sell when you're a bad team. And yet, like, we still sit 2.5 games out of a playoff spot. Like, they still have a chance despite trading away one of the best pitchers in baseball. And even Casey Mize, who was an all-star last year and was putting up, all-star numbers when he was healthy this year. It sucks that we were in the position that we had to do this. At least for Skubal, I felt like we had to do this. And I was one of the people who was holding out for as long as humanly possible, saying just, they're getting hot, they're winning games. Let's just see what they can do, how close they can get up until the deadline. But once they dropped those last 2 to Kansas City, after winning the first 2, it's a Kansas City team that is not good, that does not have Bobby Witt Jr. I was like, I kind of feel like that's where things changed. And then, of course, we had that final Tarik Skubal start where they blew a 7-0 lead, which was absolutely ridiculous. But in terms of the return, I like it. I mean, you get 2 top 100 prospects. Your hope is a top 25 guy. And also, let's take a look at this outfield right now. Riley Green is an all-star. We're really excited about Max Clark, who just debuted. But Kerry Carpenter was another one of those guys that, we kind of thought or expected would be here quite a while. He has not performed well this year. He is consistently hurt. He's very often platooned. And so, I'm not going to lie, I don't know that Kerry Carpenter is going to be around here that much longer. So if you get Zaire Hope, that's a guy that can instantly slide in and hopefully, be quite productive for you. Believe it or not, the Casey Mize deal is actually the one that I'm a little bit more skeptical about. I do think that that Scott Harris probably got about as much as you could for Casey Mize. But historically, if you look at these trades at the deadline, the big trades, and Mize isn't obviously up there with Skubal, but you look at the Yu Darvish return, the Jose Barrios return, the Max Scherzer, Trey Turner return, what we got for Justin Verlander when we traded him, very often these things don't pan out that well. And so I was kind of in this space where I thought okay, the Tigers have a solid roster, not a championship winning roster, but they could sneak into the postseason, maybe win a series or 2. So I was in this space where because of how they performed, I think you have to trade Skubal. I think you have to put stock in the future and really kind of reload here. But the bullpen has been horrendous all year, and it's largely their fault that we're in this position. We've lost the most games due to our bullpen in the entire major leagues. I believe it's been 17 blown leads in the 7th inning or later, something like that. But I was in the space where, okay, you trade Skubal, you put stock in the future, reload, but keep Casey Mize, keep Gleyber Torres, these guys who are contributing for you, maybe even throw a couple peanuts to a couple major league teams for semi-competent relievers to at least, you don't want to buy big. You're not trading for Mason Miller or anything, but for relievers that can at least kind of help you hold things down until you get Jackson Joe back and hopefully Justin Verlander, who can hopefully do something for you. Because love or hate this team, this deadline, whatever it is, yes, we just traded away two really big pieces, but we still have a chance to play for something this year. So that's where I was at. Scott Harris decided to put more stock into the future and trade away Casey Mize. Hopefully those pieces we get back for him can be something for us in a year or two or however long it takes. I'm happy with the return for Skubal. It sucks that we are in this position, but we got to be full steam ahead because we just called up Max Clark. He's performed very well since being called up. And again, like I just said, we still have something to play for.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Austin, because quite frankly, I think that the latter half of this season, or whatever it is, the latter third, there are things to be excited about. And I mentioned it before these deals even happened. I mentioned it after the game on Sunday. The weekend you just had offensively, you employed or deployed your best offense of the entire season, because you called up Clark and James Outman didn't see a ton of action. I know he homered, and Jake Rogers was DFA'd. Vierling is out. Like, regardless of what happens here, you're going to see reps for Valencia and how you lead, and Max Clark and Kevin McGonigal. And there are teams that sell off assets at the deadline, and you kind of feel like it's essentially punting the season. I think this will be closer to 2024 than anything else, where this could be a galvanizing thing. It's not me guaranteeing that they're going to come back and win the division, but for a team that by definition, with what they gave away, was sellers, there's enough here to keep them intriguing, and that's what they've been. They had that awful May, and since then they've done just enough consistently for us to think that there's at least a pathway for them to be playing meaningful baseball deep into the season. And this most recent weekend definitely helped their cause. So that will do it for this segment. When we return, we're going to talk a little bit of Lions news. It's not even, well, it is August officially now. We already have some injuries to discuss, as well as a free agent signing by Detroit. We will talk about that when we return. All right, Big Play Detroit, segment number 3. And we are officially, I think we have expelled every ounce of energy that we could possibly have out of the trade deadline. It is time to move on. And we'll get back to baseball, but it is time to talk about some other sports. So let's talk with the Lions, right? Training camp has begun. I'm not yet at a point where I'm concerned about this Jahmyr Gibbs holdout. I want to give it another week or so. We are so early in training camp, but it's something that I discussed, and we both talked about it, Austin, about, but what kind of leverage does Jahmyr Gibbs have here? Because we've seen running backs do this in the past, and we've also seen organizations that have said, hey man, we're not paying you. Like, this is a fragile position. As electric as you are, there's only so much money that we can give out. So it's going to be an interesting thing to follow. What is also going to be an interesting thing to follow is that the Lions signed a guy, linebacker, Devin White, formerly of the Bucs, formerly of the Eagles, former All-Pro as well. And no disrespect to Devin White, but when there's kind of a leadoff of like former All-Pro, you get the impression of, okay, maybe this guy isn't quite what he once was. And we sort of realized pretty quickly why the Lions made this move. Look, as a whole, there's nothing about this that I think is disastrous. You add linebacker depth. He didn't have a great year last year, really. And I think that he's definitely past his prime. He's had some injury issues, but he is still only 28 years old. It's not out of the realm of possibility that he could see an uptick in production. He's going to have, keys to the car here. He's going to have the ability to start. And a big reason why this move was made in the first place was because Jimmy Rolder, former Michigan Wolverine, who was drafted by the Lions in this most recent draft, injured. Looks like he's going to be out for quite a long time. Lions defensive depth, whether it's secondary or linebackers, has obviously been an issue outside of Jack Campbell, who we love. So they went out and they signed White. I can't be mad at Brad Holmes for doing it. I can be mad at the fact that, and look, here's the thing. Every team in every sport claims that they're the most injured team in the world. Okay. In reality, usually your team doesn't have more injuries than anybody else. You just paid closer attention because it's, there's more personal, value at stake for your team. The exception to that is the Detroit Lions. I have been watching sports a long time. I'll just put it this way. I think the injuries probably cost them a Super Bowl in 2024. And that doesn't excuse the way they played against Washington. That doesn't excuse that defensive game plan and, losing the coordinators. I understand all that, but I have not seen a team this consistently banged up before the season even starts, quite like this group. Now, some good news, and then I'm going to toss it over to you, Austin. Some good news came from this in that it was reported. It seemed like Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch were at least agile and on their feet in the early part of training camp, which is, I think, a great sign. Branch expected to come back at some point midseason. Kirby, I like Kirby so much that I don't want to speak anything into existence, but I have very serious doubts about how this ends with Kirby Joseph, quite frankly. But we're going to see. So, yeah, more injuries to deal with. You add linebacker depth. I don't think it's necessarily a needle mover. And my concern level remains pretty high in regards to this defense, both the secondary and linebacker core, and even the pass rush to a certain extent. But I can't, on its, taken on its own, be that critical of this move by Brad Holmes. Austin, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty satisfied with this move. I saw that actually before hearing the news that Rolder had got injured. Looks like he's going to be okay. It's nothing too serious. He's probably just going to be off his feet for a little while, or at least, not actively practicing for a little bit. But at this point, once Rolder does come back, you just have more linebacker depth. And, I think that's great. You didn't sign White to a super expensive contract. And one good thing that he does provide is durability. Looks like he played in all 17 games that the Raiders had last season, even recorded the third most tackles in the NFL last year. So it looks like they got a solid replacement for Rolder, and then you're just going to have more depth, which I think is really great, especially given that you let Alex Anzalone walk in the offseason. Defensively, I'm still just very concerned with the secondary. I think there's a lot of issues there, and hopefully some people like maybe an Ennis Rakestraw can step up. Brian Branch, it looks like he's going to be back probably sooner than we expected. I'm seeing some rumblings about that, but I'm in lockstep with you on Kirby Joseph. I think that signs do not look great as of the moment, but he's still very confident in himself and seems to want to help this team however he can. So all in all, looks like Rolder's going to be okay. And Lions just got another durable, productive piece. So yeah, happy with it.
Yeah, it's strange because you bring up that point of him having the second most tackles in the NFL last season. And, the linebacker position is obviously where you're going to accumulate a lot of tackles. I mean, look at Jack Campbell a year ago. But it's one of those things where the eye test, I think, is good. I saw some of the peripherals. PFF was not favorable to him a year ago. But, it's so hard to tell with different systems and coming into a spot where I think that he's going to be comfortable here. He's going to be given that starting job right away. Hopefully he can then thrive and improve this defense. So we'll be right back in segment number 4. Austin, you're going to be running point. It will be our All Say This segment when we return in segment number 4. This is Big Play Detroit. Here we are, Big Play Detroit, segment number 4. Austin, it's time for you to shine, buddy boy. It is our All Say This segment. I will take the Fact or Fiction segment. In segment number 5, going to talk a little bit of Michigan football news. I guess it's more of an editorial about Michigan football. But Austin, segment 4, what do you got for our All Say This? Lay it on me.
I'll say this. Dan Campbell is the face of Detroit sports. And the reason I was thinking about this is because Tarik Skubal, of course, was just traded, and he's one of the star players that we have across the entire city. There's been a debate for a long while about, is it Tarik or is it Cade Cunningham, who's the face of Detroit sports? In terms of players, I think it's probably definitely Cade Cunningham, although the Lions do have a handful of guys that you could probably point to, but there's different reasons you could say they are or are not the face of Detroit sports. But I think all in all, you don't usually point to a coach as being like the face of either a team, much less, a city. But I think he has the spirit and the energy and the leadership that really grabs people here in the Rust Belt in the Midwest. We're really attracted to that as a Michigan State fan who's seen that kind of thing from Tom Izzo for nearly 3 decades now. I very much I loved him instantly, and he's just continued to prove himself over and over and over again. Now, of course, last season was not the best, and there were a lot of reasons why that was the case. There's a lot of questions and concerns going into this upcoming season, but it's going to be a great challenge for him. And I think that he's largely up to the task. And yeah, it's a weird thing because, like I said, very often it's, a player, whether it's a Tarik Skubal or a Cade Cunningham or whatever, there's a lot of lines like Goff, Hutchinson, Amon-Ra St. Brown that, a lot of people really like, and their jerseys, just fly off the racks. But I think Dan Campbell is going to be the one that probably breaks the Detroit curse. And I mean, we have such a long drought in terms of championships now. And even after last season not making the postseason, I still think the Lions are probably the best equipped team in Detroit to take the whole thing home. So, yeah.
Generally speaking, I agree with you. Dan Campbell has two huge things going for him. Number one is that he's taken an organization that has not had a lot of success to new heights. And, he came out and he talked a big game and he backed it up, right? I mean, we can have our frustrations with the way he's coached in the playoffs, but the fact is there was a long time where the idea of even winning or making the playoffs seemed like an impossibility for the Detroit Lions. Number two, and this kind of goes back to Tarik, Dan Campbell will never be traded. That is a big part of this. It is because, when Tarik was making his run and winning multiple Cy Youngs, and I brought up, gosh, this guy's amazing. He's at the top of his game. There were people that said, yeah, he's going to leave us. And that has been a thing. I mean, even Dylan Larkin now with him requesting a trade, and I don't think he necessarily would be on the short list considering the Red Wings haven't done much lately. Like with Campbell, there is this sense of he's going to remain loyal. And now, look, with all coaches, and this is not me saying this is going to happen anytime soon, but it's just the truth. Most coaches don't ride off into the sunset. At some point, there's probably going to be a separation from Dan Campbell. I don't know. It could be 5 years from now. It could be next year. It could be 10 years from now. I have no clue, right? It depends on how they perform. But I think that is a big part of this. And I think the Tigers especially scarred a lot of fans and the Stafford stuff as well with you have these guys you become attached to and then they're traded. And then they sign with other teams. And then they become Hall of Famers with other teams, or they win championships with other teams. It has been apparent from day one that Campbell has not wanted to coach anywhere else but Detroit. And with the attitude and just the way he generally speaks, I think that, face of Detroit sports. I think it's fair to say. All right, be back in segment number 5. It'll be our Fact or Fiction segment. I want to talk a little bit about something that happened at Big Ten Media Day for college football last week. Talk about that when we return. Segment number 5 here, Big Play Detroit. And I didn't get a chance to talk about it in the first 4 segments, but here we are. It is time for our Fact or Fiction segment. We want to talk a little bit of college ball as we get ever so close to opening kickoff for the college football season. And it involves Michigan football coach, first-year coach, Kyle Whittingham. Fact or fiction? Kyle Whittingham doesn't understand the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry. All right, people. So where this comes from is the fact that, look, obviously Media Day was in Chicago last week. And this is just the case with media, and it's not me trying to disrespect anyone in media. I have great appreciation for the media, especially in Michigan. But Media Day it's a little bit looser, and it's an opportunity often to get some pretty unique sound bites or pretty unique quotes. As Jim Harbaugh would like to say, at a certain point, teams kind of go into the submarine. I feel like this is kind of pre-submarine season. Guys, they show up in their suits. They're not wearing their pads. It's not after or before practice. It's formal, but it's a little bit more casual. And sometimes you end up with some really good sound bites. The classic one from several years ago, Jim Harbaugh saying, either we're going to beat Ohio State or we're going to die trying. That was before 2021. We know what happened next, obviously. And Kyle Whittingham was asked a lot about the Ohio State rivalry. And it was pretty clear. I'm not going to single out any reporter because I think it was multiple instances of this. They were trying to get him to say some pretty nasty things about Ohio State. And consistently, he shot it down. He did not go as far as to say that he hates Ohio State. He's talked about the players there that he respects. He talked about his relationship with Ryan Day. He talked about his relationship with Urban Meyer, even going as far as to say he would let Urban Meyer come to Michigan's practices all but 1 week, that week obviously being the Ohio State week. Him and Meyer go way back. Obviously, both of them were head coaches at Utah. Whittingham took over for Meyer after he left and went to Florida following the undefeated season with Utah, and I think it was 2004. So there is a history there, and it led to some backlash because Michigan fans feel how they feel about Ohio State. Ohio State fans feel how they feel about Michigan, and Austin, you went through this with Jonathan Smith a few years ago of that fear, that concern of, does he have an understanding of what this rivalry is? And so let's go back to our original question. Fact or fiction, he doesn't understand the rivalry. I'm going to say fiction, and here's why. I think too often fans equate intensity with hatred. Hatred to me is not required in a rivalry game. Intensity is. Intensity to me is knowing when you're playing that game and every single week doing something to try to make sure that you're improving your chances of winning that game. Intensity is having a clock in your locker room that counts down to when that game is going to be played. That's attention to detail. That I have no problem with. Hatred to me often leads to a lack of discipline. Hatred is dumb penalties, hitting guys when they're out of bounds, phasing yourself out, making uncharacteristic mistakes in these games. And I'll use the Michigan State example as a prime example. So Jonathan Smith, year one, loses to Michigan in Ann Arbor, tries to go out and talk a big game. We're going to remember this sucker. We're not going to forget it. Michigan State last season, well, they probably would have lost anyway, tried to come out as the more intense team, and they were wildly undisciplined. They were the more penalized team in that game. And even for a Michigan team that was very vulnerable, they shot themselves in the foot a lot. We can talk about all this bravado and we can talk about understanding of the rivalry. Ultimately, what matters in this game are the X's and O's of it all. I would so much rather have a, quote, passive team that is prepared or over-prepared than a highly intense team that goes out and shoots themselves in the foot and isn't disciplined. Whittingham is not going to be a coach that's going to provide a lot of bulletin board material. He is, and I mean this as a compliment, especially considering the recent era. Kyle Whittingham is boring. And I think that there will be a section of the Michigan fan base that is going to be bothered by that is going to miss the passive aggressiveness of a Jim Harbaugh. That's going to miss the born on third thinking they hit a triple kind of quotes. In my opinion, that's exactly what Michigan needs right now. Now, I throw all this out there. If Michigan goes to Columbus this year and they lose by 20 in November, I'm going to be having a different conversation because I don't like losing that game, and I don't like getting blown out in that game like they were a year ago where they just got physically manhandled. But I think that very often in rivalries, there's this belief that in order to be successful, you have to hate. You have to feel this personal vendetta towards the individuals that you're going against. I've never really abided by that principle, and I've continued not to. Last year, I'll look at the basketball program, and I think this is kind of end my argument. Do I think Dusty May hated Tom Izzo? Do I think he hated Michigan State? No. But you know what Dusty May did? He assembled an unbelievable team. And that team was able to do things that no other Michigan team had done against Michigan State, namely beating them twice, going to Breslin and winning, if not by double figures, close to double figures, and ultimately winning a national championship. That's how you back it up. It's with your play. It's not with the bulletin board material. And in the short term, Michigan fans could be bothered by that, but in the long term, I kind of feel like it's what they need. All right, we're going to be back for our final segment. Going to talk some gambling stuff, and we are going to go back to baseball because I think there's some odds for the National League MVP that I think are pretty remarkable right now, and I just want to point to. So we will be right back. Big Play Detroit is brought to you by FanDuel. Baseball fans, think you know who's hitting a homer today? Well, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. Joining the action is easy. Just make your free pick on who's hitting a home run in their game, and if you're right, you'll get a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. You've got nothing to lose and a lot to gain. And don't forget, you can make a free pick every day during the MLB season. It's just another reason why FanDuel is the home for home runs. So, are you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com/BigPlay. That's FanDuel.com/BigPlay to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of the MLB. 21 plus select states for Kansas and affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, 18 plus DC, Kentucky, Wyoming. No purchase necessary. Option in required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable profit boost tokens. Restrictions apply, including any token expiration and max wager amount. See terms at sportsbook.com/FanDuel. Gambling problem, 1-800-GAMBLER, 1-800-MY-RESET. Call 1-888-789-7777. Visit ccpg.org/chat for Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.com for Maryland. Visit gamblinghelpma.com. Call 1-800-327-5050 for Massachusetts. Call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY. Text HOPE-NY for New York. Call 1-877-770-7867 for Louisiana. All right, final segment here, segment number 6 on Big Play Detroit. It is our gambling segment brought to you by FanDuel. And I was looking at the odds for National League MVP right now. Currently, Shohei Ohtani, the favorite. Unsurprising, he has 4 MVPs total in his back pocket, 2 with the Angels, 2 with the Dodgers. He's currently on FanDuel, the favorite at -145. In second place at plus odds is Pete Crow Armstrong. I'm just going to say it. I think Pete Crow Armstrong is going to win the National League MVP. And I'm not just saying this from a gambling standpoint. I think he's going to do it for a couple reasons. One, Ohtani, I think, is close to being done pitching for the season. And I think the fact that the Dodgers just went out and got Skubal is a testament to the fact that they don't need Sorry, I got shut out. 1 second. All right, we're back. I think that when you look at the Dodgers, well, I guess not. Fuck. All right, we back now. Can you hear me? Okay. All right. Just making sure we should be able to roll back in. All right. Just one more segment, then we can all head to Starbucks and we should be good. You know, with the Dodgers right now, I don't think pitching Shohei Ohtani is of utmost importance. They're going to run away with that division. They just added Tarik Skubal. I think the idea of having Shohei pitch, and he was pitching great, but having a full season of him going 110 plus innings and just padding his stats for MVP, I don't think that's really what the Dodgers are thinking about right now. They want to make sure he's healthy going into October. And from a regular season standpoint, this is a regular season award, that does matter. Ohtani is the greatest baseball player I've ever seen. He's probably the most talented baseball player we will ever see. I have never been someone that abides by the principle that just because he pitches and hits, that he should be guaranteed an MVP every year. Okay. What I've said from the beginning, when he signed with the Angels, I said, this is only cool to me if he does both at an elite level. And what has been amazing about Ohtani is that he's done that. At the same time, best ability is availability. And if he goes basically the entire second half of the season without pitching, then, you know, I don't put much stock in that. At that point, I pay more attention to value. And right now, you know who leads the National League in wins above replacement? It's Pete Crow Armstrong, who's been unbelievably clutch this year. He's put up historic numbers with runners in scoring position. He is the best defensive center fielder of his era, arguably ever. Like the metrics are just insane with this guy. He's probably going to have an 8-WAR season and what is really his second full year of major league action. And I also think, well, I'm not a believer in voter fatigue necessarily. I am starting to be a believer in Dodger fatigue. And the fact that they have hoarded all of these great players, they've gone out and they've gotten Skubal, and they have this loaded rotation with Yamamoto and Snell and Glasnow, and like and Robleski, who's been incredible. It's kind of an embarrassment of riches. I think that there's going to be a push for somebody else in that MVP spot. And I also think when we talk about most valuable, one, WAR is a statistic that measures a player's value. PCA leads in that. But secondly, look at how good the Dodgers are. As amazing as Ohtani is, I think there's going to be an argument this year that Pete Crow Armstrong is more valuable to the Cubs than Ohtani is to the Dodgers. And I think the deeper we get with him being so young, he's going to be going for it. PCA is. And he's going to have many opportunities. He's had many clutch moments. He's a very flashy player. Not to say Ohtani isn't, but the deeper you get into a career, the more people become accustomed to your greatness. And Shohei's got 4 of these things. He's going for 5. He remains the favorite. I would sprinkle on that plus 110 a good bet on the FanDuel Sportsbook for Pete Crow Armstrong to come away with the National League MVP. He has just grown into an unbelievably exciting player for the Chicago Cubs. All right, that will do it for today's show. And I feel like we covered a lot of ground, but good job. You can follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014. You can follow me on TikTok at Chris Castellani, Instagram, ChrisCastle95. You can find all of our post-game videos on I should know my own website, on CastellaniContent.com. You can find us there. You can find all the post-game videos. And thank you for the continued support. I'm glad this trade deadline is over. Austin, let's get your plugs in and let's get out of here.
I'm on X at Austin Sisler. I'm on Instagram at Austin Sisler _20. And if you have anything that you would like to promote or you're interested in sponsoring our show, feel free to reach out to either Chris or myself.
Wonderful. Thank you very much to the people at Big Play. Thank you very much to our audience that continues to be supportive of what we do. We're going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to get better. And every week has provided us with plenty to talk about since we began doing this show. So thank you very much, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of your week. Talk to you soon. Peace and happiness.